Welcome to Inside Philadelphia City Council. I'm your host, Al Butler. Joining us today is Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds-Brown. Thank you, Councilwoman, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Always welcome the opportunity.
Thank you. So, obviously, one of the big things that's concerning the entire city, and as a council person at large, you get to deal with the whole city and see that issue is dealing with schools.
Sure.
The school closing, huge. We're coming up towards the end of the school year now, and then there's already talk about what's going to have to happen in order for schools to open up in September. So talk to us a little bit about how you see that situation right now.
Sure.
And what has to be done to address it.
Sure. Well, you're absolutely right. We are approaching that time in our city council's budget cycle where we listen to testimony from all city departments and now from the school district of Philadelphia, as provided by Dr. Haidt and Pedro Ramos, who serves as president of the School Reform Commission. And I will say to you that Dr. Haidt was very honest. He was very forthcoming, very direct, and stating exactly where we are. And I will say to you that in the 12 years I've been in city council, each year we're confronted with a crisis. I've never seen it as described by Dr. Haidt. The school district is asking for $60 million from the City of Philadelphia City Council, and for me that means the Nutter administration and City Council together, and $160 million from the state. And so he painted for us what the picture will look like if we don't figure out how we get that done. Now, to the credit of our president, President Darrell Clarke, City Council has done its part in the last 3 years to figure out how we fill the school district budget hole under President Clarke's leadership. This year, President Clarke has said we need to look to non-traditional funding streams to get to that $60 million. And there are a number of us on City Council who agree with that. I'm one of them. And so percolating are ideas right now, just ideas as to how we come up with a funding formula, because I doubt that we'll be able to find a non-vote on any one particular idea. So it's really going to take collaborative effort from the second floor, from members of council, to come up with a funding formula that moves us towards that $60 million. And we first believe that it is the responsibility of the Commonwealth to honor its part of this equation first. So the clock is ticking, and parents are waiting. Parents are concerned because let's look at the worst case scenario. We've been told that there will be no librarians. We've been told that there will be no school counselors, no assistant principals, no athletics, no arts and culture. Imagine a school without those activities.
It's hard to believe.
I can't believe it. And so we will be at a place where we've never been before. So we have a lot of work to do to figure out how we get to that $60 million tab.
How do you see the transition going right now as far as the process goes for schools that are going to close? Because inevitably some of the schools are going to have to close anyway.
At least 23, yeah.
At least 23 schools are going to close. And then those parents and children are going to have to deal with that process. Do you feel that process is going the way you'd like it to see right now? Do you feel like the parents and children are fully aware of everything that's going on?
It is a process, and it's a process that didn't start yesterday. It didn't start last September. In fact, what many of us may not remember or realize that process really started under the former superintendent, Dr. Arlene Ackerman. It was just in its formative stages. And when Dr. Haidt accepted the responsibility to come serve as our district superintendent, that was somewhere in that, on that job description. And so to Dr. Haidt's credit, they sat back and they listened. They made some recommendations, and then they listened some more. And based on the recommendations from our Reverend Waller of our city, pastor of Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church, and others, they made changes. And that really matters. When leadership listens and then goes back and does a recaucus, I say, gets back with the leaders of their team or members of his team, and then we present a new proposal that is more acceptable to those who are going to be most affected. So we have to understand that it is a process that we need to respect. And parents aren't ready yet, for sure. Change is hard. Change is exceedingly difficult. And so we have to be confident, and I am confident in knowing that Dr. Haidt and members of his team are going to ensure that parents understand how the transition is going to happen. And here's why I'm confident, because there are a number of members of City Council who have made it exceedingly clear it matters that students who might be attending Lamberton and now may have to go to Overbrook, know how they're going to get through safety zones and still be safe and walking back and forth to those schools. So you have district council members that are working very, very closely with Dr. Height to ensure that this transition of closing down 23 schools becomes in many ways a seamless transition. And as I recall during his testimony, he made it clear that we're not going to get all of this done in 1 year. It's very, very difficult to do because parents have to make adjustments in their own lives for their kids to honor or to embrace these new adjustments that the school district is putting forth. And understand that the school district had to do some things differently because the dollars aren't there. So what we know is that there are 70,000 fewer young people attending our Philadelphia public schools. Many of them have transitioned to our Philadelphia charter schools, and that's the beauty of the system we live in that it gives parents choices. But with that reality comes the need for management to make different decisions. And just as a home that has 8 family members and then those parents become empty nesters, typically what they do is downsize. And so running a major system like the Philadelphia public school system actually required management and the administration to make similar difficult decisions. Why heat a building that is half full? I mean, we had some schools where there were 25% occupancy and still be responsible for all the costs that come with a building if there's 100% occupancy, such as maintenance staff, light, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
City Council has a role, the mayor's office has a role,
Yes.
and sometimes it feels for some members of council that role is kind of being ignored or kind of pushed to the side. Do you feel any of that?
I believe that those feelings are legitimate. There is an intangible quality called respect, and it really should be a two-way street because, again, each one of us are independently elected, so each one of us were elected because we bring something to the table. And so in a discourse, there should be an opportunity to agree to disagree respectfully, but we continue to focus on what the long-term goal is. And so you have members who have some very legitimate concerns with tangible circumstances attached to them that they are very, very unhappy about. I pride myself on expressing my disagreements or concerns in what I call a caucus session. When I come to you and I say I need to have a caucus session with you, that typically means it's something I'm not particularly happy about. And it also means it's not an issue that is anyone else's business, most particularly the press. And my experience has been when you approach persons that you respect, but you have a disagreement, and you focus on where the common ground is. If you can just focus on the common ground, it doesn't have to be 100%, but typically between the two of you, there's going to be some common ground that moves the ball or moves the needle. And that's where that's what I believe is helpful in a discourse if we are both authentically, deeply concerned about making a difference.
Another one of those deep concerns for the city is this whole situation with AVI.
That 3-letter word.
Yes, it's everybody's favorite at this point. And so there's a lot of talk about that, and it's also very important to the future of the schools and what happens there with that kind of funding. So can you help folks get some clarity on that?
I'd be happy to. I and a number of members of council are deeply concerned about seniors who are quite intimidated by this process. There are a number of us who are concerned about hard-to-reach populations, namely those who don't speak English, and vulnerable populations who are already in despair. So yes, it is the law, and yes, it's being rolled out, if you will. I joined a number of members of council who have been deeply concerned about getting back to the word you used earlier, the process. It appears to have been rushed, and I base that because I've attended some AVI meetings in our neighborhoods, and my heart aches for seniors who are desperately concerned about losing their homes. There are too many. In fact, the numbers are that only about 100,000 have actually taken advantage of the homestead exemption. And so if there are 300,000 plus eligible, but yet only 100,000 have taken advantage of it, to me that suggests that we still have some more work to do. So I am appreciative of bills introduced both by President Clark and Councilwoman Janie Blackwell to extend the deadline date for the homestead exemption. So the question from the audience might be, and what is the homestead exemption? Well, if you own your home and live in your home, then you automatically are eligible for a $30,000 exemption on your mortgage. Now, there are no age requirements, and there are no residency requirements. It just means one thing, that you own your home and live in your home. And so we have to be mindful of persons who don't have computers in their homes, who don't go on the internet to find out this information. And I believe that it's the duty of government to go the extra mile, for as long as that mile has to be, to ensure that in this new world of AVI, that absolutely every single citizen is aware of those protection measures. And there's still too many citizens who have not applied for the homestead exemption. All of our citizens who own their home, should be aware of it and that it exists. And if you own your home and live in your home, then we encourage you to reach out to your district council person or council member at large, or any one of our housing agencies or the mayor's office to get the application to qualify for that tax savings on your assessment.
And when it comes to deadlines, right now, those things are being worked on.
Those deadlines are very, very fluid at this hour, and so that's why we urge citizens of our city to call into those local offices. Absolutely.
Another issue with the neighborhoods that I know that you're aware of is dealing with these off-road vehicles and ATVs and dirt bikes and things of that nature. I've lived over by 29th and Pennsylvania in the Girard Avenue area, and I live in South Philadelphia, Center City now, and this is a regular thing for me. So I'm looking forward to something being done about this, seeing people drive down the street, popping wheelies in large groups, running lights. It can be very disruptive to the neighborhood. So what are some of the things that you've heard, and how can City Council address this kind of issue? Because in the past, I've heard from my conversations that it's difficult for the police to do anything about it.
Yes, the short term for them are ATVs, also known as all-terrain vehicles. And we want persons who own these to recreate, but we want them to do it in a way that's responsible and that does not put other citizens in danger. And there are more and more reports by police and by hospitals where citizens are actually being killed by these all-terrain vehicles. And so in consultation with the mayor's office and the police department, we thought it was overdue for us as a city to look at this public safety issue and do something about it. And so last spring, actually, I called for hearings to at least let's first have the conversation and see why these are out of control in many, many ways. And we learned that they are out of control, that in the way you just described, all-terrain vehicle operators are running up on pavements and running through streets and violating stop signs and the like, and police cannot chase them. And so police have been put at a disadvantage to arrest this particular issue. So there's now a new law in place that due to go in effect actually April 1, but with a 30-day grace period, so that we can give those who like this type of recreation a chance to become acquainted with the new regulations. And if you are have any all-terrain vehicle on public property, public land, then yes, it can be confiscated by the police, and yes, the police will then confiscate it by the police, and currently right now given to the Philadelphia Parking Authority. And then at a designated hour going forward, time point going forward, they will be sold. So we have a stronger measure in place that we know will make a difference. But we still have those who want to recreate. And so our duty is not over. And so this summer, in fact, we will be going to visit an actual legitimate all-terrain vehicle park in Egg Harbor Township in New Jersey, and see how a corporate citizen has funded the renovation and the rollout of an all-terrain vehicle park for those who enjoy that particular sport.
As a councilwoman at large, you have a lot of flexibility, and that gives you an opportunity to dive into some issues that some folks who are dealing with the concerns of the constituents within a district may not have the flexibility to do. One of those things that you've been able to get involved in is dealing with women in leadership positions and executive boards and their representation. Why this is an issue you wanted to address and move us forward to how you think you'll be able to put your imprint on solving the issue here in the city of Philadelphia.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the question very, very much. Because one positive aspect of being an at-large member is that you really do get a chance to focus on broad-based public policy issues that affect the city as a whole. And what was a real trigger for me in terms of interest was in 2009, President Barack Obama, for the first time in 50 years, released a report on the status of women and girls in the country. And it was a very deeply comprehensive report that looked at any and every aspect involving women. And one of those revelations was that we as a country are still doing exceedingly badly when it comes to women being represented on boards. Currently, the number is 16% nationwide. Philadelphia is at 11% of women on the top, 11% of the board seats of the top 100 companies in the region are held by women, 11%. And if we keep going at that rate, my 16-year-old daughter will be 75 years old before we see some level of equity. And it gets worse than that because less than 1% of those board seats are held by women of color. And 41% of the boards in the region have no women on them at all. And so when we live in a society, or let's just say Philadelphia, where the city is 82% women, black, brown, and yellow, and yet when it comes to women being in decision-making positions on boards, to me that suggests inequity, and it means that gender equality, we still have a long, long way to go. And so we held hearings on that issue, women on boards. We got brilliant testimony from a cross-section of women and a few good men. And then a year later, we produced a report on the recommendations, if you will. Out of that report, one of those recommendations is that, and I have now introduced a bill that says, if you want to do business in the city of Philadelphia, then you will now have to disclose to us what your board representation look like, what the composition of your board looks like. So what we know is that Philadelphia is 82% women, black, brown, and other. And when you have that reality stacked against the notion that 11% of the top 100, 11% of the board seats are only occupied by women, to us that suggests gender inequality, and you have too many women in our city who are capable, hardworking, credentialed, experienced, articulate, who can at any day sit in those board chairs and offer up meaningful recommendations about how to move a company forward. It has to happen in a way where the leadership of that organization has to be committed to the notion that women should get an equal shot. And I haven't been in a circumstance where, because I was a woman, was not, and being an African-American woman wasn't granted the opportunity. It reminds women like myself that we have to show up 3 times prepared to be equal. You don't complain about it. You just show up 3 times prepared to be equal. And then when you're in position to have a voice about it, do not be silent about it. Continue to raise the level of awareness, because a lot of it is awareness. And interestingly enough, when you raise the level of awareness, you then find persons who are not only enlightened, but want to contribute in a way to make that circumstance better.
How receptive has the business world and corporate community been to this legislation?
It's been spotty. It's been spotty at best. The good news is that the mayor sent someone to offer testimony and has actually talked about it as he's traveled around to corporate Philadelphia. And so a part of our next step is to actually meet with members of the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, and specifically with the executive committee, to learn from them how we can make things better. Now, you have women that sit on that executive committee who are excited and anxious about the possibility and are real advocates and champions within that circle. But as with most things, it's going to take the collective will of the executive committee of the chamber, who are the leaders of the chamber leadership, the chamber membership, to really eventually make a difference.
What has been some of the pushback that you hear? What are some of their reasons for being against it?
One legitimate reason is, where's the pool? Where's the ready pool? Where's the bench? Do you have a bench of women who are ready to move in to positions of leadership and responsibility? So you really do have to have a bench of women who come with the skill set and the knowledge base to then want to transition onto boards. And so my office is hosting a series of brown lunches with Blondell Brown bag lunches, wherein women come in during the lunch hour and bring their lunch, and we have panels of women that are actually speaking with women across the board who want to learn, what does it take to move into a board position? How do we become better financial architects of our lives? What does public speaking require? It's those kind of professional development opportunities that provide the information to arm women on what they need to do so that they can transition into positions of leadership and responsibility.
As a woman in office, how do you take that into account as you start to shape your agenda and some things that you want to address and what you'd like to see the body address in City Council?
Sure. Well, for me, it presents enormous opportunity. Pennsylvania, in fact, ranks number 47 of states of women in elected office. Pennsylvania ranks number 47. So for those of us who are fortunate enough to be elected into positions of leadership, I believe we need to seize the moment and put in and go after those issues that are going to level the playing field for women. More women are going and graduating from college than men. So you have all these positive outcomes happening for women, yet on the corporate side of the ledger, there's still a great deal of inequity. And so again, it presents enormous opportunity to raise the awareness, to do the homework, investigate where the opportunities are, and then put in place legislation that is going to move the needle or at least equalize the playing field.
How receptive have other members of council been to your efforts?
We have, I'm pleased to say, a council that is receptive, but reckons with the notion that it's 2013. And so when you look at the fact that we have Councilwoman Maria Quinones Sanchez, Councilwoman Janie Blackwell, Councilwoman Tasco, Councilwoman Bass, and myself, 5 out of 17 is not a bad number, given the fact that Pennsylvania ranks number 47 out of 50. And then we have, I would dare to say, all of the male members of City Council who either have daughters, have wives, or nieces who want to see a level playing field. And so it does not become a hard sell.
I can get that. So when you take those numbers into account, are there other things that you see on the agenda that specifically deal with women that you'd like to address in the future?
Being a woman and a mother, I pay a lot of attention to girls as victims in awful, awful circumstances. And I learned fall 2011 that Philadelphia is actually on the FBI's hit list when it comes to the trafficking of women and girls in the region. And having learned that, we decided again to call for hearings so that we could learn more carefully and more deeply, how does Philadelphia end up on an FBI hit list when it comes to that? And so we had hearings, and they were very, very, parts of it were quite frankly very difficult to hear. And in fact, we were able to have a victim of human trafficking come in and offer testimony, not on camera. And we had a couple of nurses come in who have to take care of these young ladies when they've been sexually abused. And so having gotten through that, we offered a bill, because what we discovered along the way is that massage parlors are harbors, if you will, for human trafficking of women and girls. And though many of our massage parlors are legitimate, licensed business establishments, we discovered a loophole in the current law in the state that says that touch therapy is exempted from the work of massage parlors. So we've put in a bill to close the loophole, which says if you want to participate in touch therapy, then you too must A, have a license, and B, if you post the license, and if you C, do not, then you'll be fined accordingly. The loophole allowed for the continued human trafficking of women and girls.
Being a woman of color, and some of the experiences that you've gone through, obviously, just like myself as a man of color, we didn't get here alone. We got here on the shoulders of other folks, and oftentimes had to point or look to people, and people helped us along. So who are some of the people that you either looked to or got direct help from?
There are a number of women along the way in my life who touched me in some type of way, and a woman I never met, but I got a chance to observe during the hearings of Anita Hill was Barbara Jordan, and the very profound impact and presence she had during those hearings. And for me, it was memorable that a woman who looks like me could be in that circle and sphere of influence and be very, very compelling in conducting herself in a way that was respectful and respected. And more recently, Joan Myers-Brown of Philadelphia, when I look at the institution she's created there 42 years ago as a grassroots community-based a dance program to now an internationally world-renowned dance company that is one of Philadelphia's cultural ambassadors, you don't do that by talking about it. She has been about making sure that young women and men of color have an opportunity to hone their craft and sharpen their craft and to a professional level, and then are able to take that skill set and travel around the world. They travel 46 weeks out of the year around the world promoting dance. And then more recently, I look at the work of Councilwoman Marion Tasco. I volunteered for her on her campaign when she ran for city commissioner. I was one of those people that you met at the door who was, accepting the contributions. And I look now where she's come to 30 years later, is quite reassuring that if you do the work, and that you have to do the work, you can't fake the work. And learn along the way, try to minimize your mistakes. We're going to make them. I had a boss who told me a long time ago, one thing about you, you only make one mistake twice. Now, you're going to make a mistake again, but it may be a different mistake. And so learning from the mistakes and listening to those who've already carved the path. Councilwoman Augusta Clark, the role model she was for 20 years here in Philadelphia City Council. And therefore, the expectation is that I then have to do the same and be the same for someone else. And what that means for me is creating a bench of young women who I'll be prepared to pass the baton to. Shame on me if I am not working with and mentoring the next leg of leadership of women who too want to come into government and make a difference.
Now, you mentioned Joan Myers-Brown and the wonderful work that they do at Philadelphia. One of the things that Philadelphia has experienced over the last few years is an explosion in the arts community. Avenue of the Arts, North and South, are growing continually. Talk about how important that is for you and to the city of Philadelphia to have the arts community be so vibrant.
They are that. They are an economic engine for our city. And what we know is that if you spend $1 in the arts, if you invest $1, meaning attend a movie theater, there's a $4 domino effect from the restaurant that benefits to the parking lot that benefits, and so that matters. Philadelphia has over 200 plus arts and cultural institutions in the city of all scales, and when we look at what that means for young people, arts and culture actually saves young people's lives. Too many times, if you miss them in the classroom with the academics, but you can show their worth and their value from an arts perspective, you save them. And what we know also is that young people who participate in arts and culture are 98% more likely to go on to college and 100% less likely to end up at 1801 Vine Street. So they really do matter. At the end of the day, they say that there are 3 colors, there are 12 notes, 26 letters of the alphabet, and 5 dance positions. It's what you do with them that matters.
Councilwoman, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
That concludes another installment of Inside Philadelphia City Council. I'm your host, Al Butler. See you around the hall.